you're given, that's how we live it. Don't be mad at the system, it's simply how we've existed. I hear a lot of people talking like they politicians and choose to be an accountant because it's safe in a business. Not because they want to do it, just because they heard it pays. And who the fuck wants to be poor knowing that's how we've been raised? Society is getting heavy, I can feel the weight. The pressure of success is like 100 million pounds of shit.
How you guys doing today? It's Anthony Gangi. Welcome to another episode of Tier Talk. Today, me and Connie are going to explore a very tough dialogue. Hopefully, Russ will be able to join in later in the week because we may have to revisit it again. But I want to get this dialogue out as quick as possible because it was a request from one of our subscribers. Basically, they're having trouble turning in somebody, and they're in conflict. It's an officer. So I think what me and Connie are going to explore is why there could be a conflict with turning somebody in. I'm not going to say the actions are obvious because I'm not going to go too much into the scenario because it's not as obvious. It's more of a feeling as opposed to knowing. And I think that's going to be part of the conflict that we'll explore. But it's definitely a great dialogue because some people think that it's that quick to turn in somebody. And I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. Of course you should. Don't get me wrong. But I think this is a good dialogue that can explore the conflict when you have to turn somebody in. Look what I said. When you have to turn somebody in. Are we going to have conflict with it? Yes. And that's the dialogue that we're going to explore. We're going to explore from a custody side and then maybe even from a civilian side, because I'm sure they'll have conflict as well. But I think it's definitely a discussion worth exploring. And again, we'll try to have Russ on later in the week. But I wanted to get it done because the person asked and it was just too much to write back. I'm not going to, it's a lengthy email. So let's just do a video and then I'll send them over the link. As always, our guest is author of The Cage Was Her Cocoon, which is now available for pre-sale. Check out the website, which you'll say shortly. And great book, by the way. Author Connie Alleyne. Connie, how are you? Introduce yourself.
Hello, everybody. Connie Alleyne here. I am the founder and president of the Civilian Corrections Academy. I'm also the podcast host of The Fly Behind the Wall. And now I am an author for The Cage Was Her Cocoon. It has been quite a journey in of itself, getting the book together, and it's all out there. And whoo, I can't wait. But tonight we're going to talk about something very interesting. I know it is a struggle to come forward when, you know, you do have a colleague who's getting caught up. So, you know, we'll figure it out together.
Yeah, we're going to take the journey together. We haven't scripted it. It's just, hey, Connie, can we do a show? Sure. And we're just pretty much giving out the idea right now. So we'll see where the dialogue goes. That's kind of what's good about what we do here. We are constructive, you know, as we state what the issue is and we try to be empathetic and objective. All right, guys, now if you haven't, the show Tier Talks for you, brave men and women that work in corrections. So please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. The bell's going to notify you every time I post a video. We're going to go to our sponsor. We come back. Let's talk about some of the conflicts that we're going to face when we have to deal with reporting what could be a corrupt staff member. Stand by.
I wanted to attend a university that had an intelligence program. I wanted to look at problems different. I wanted to increase my critical thinking abilities. AMU offered those avenues to expand. Obtaining your degree as an adult, you're actually paying yourself and investing in yourself. You can't put a dollar on it, it's priceless. It's something that can never be taken away from you.
American Military University. Learn from the leader.
Guys, inmate manipulation is a course that is highly needed. It's the process that's so slow moving and subtle that you don't realize it's happening. When inmates choose to manipulate, they manipulate our need to react. Situational awareness and insight is going to save your career. It's going to save you from doing foolish things. Listen to your gut. So the more insight we have, the more we can recognize what isn't so overt, and we can correct our behavior before we fall into a trap that we can't get out of. If you allow an inmate to pull you out of your prescribed role, you are opening up a door for a host of problems.
Inmate manipulation, the psychology behind inmate manipulation. Available now. Link in description. All right, and we're back. So first off, the reason why I'm doing this show, let's just get this out there right now, is to show support for an action that we don't want to do. Yes, we have to do it, but doesn't mean we want to do it, if that makes any sense. Because this could be someone that we have a good relationship with. So the reason why I wanted to have this dialogue again is to show support. You know, this person's going to need to be motivated to do the right thing. And some people are like, well, it's easy. The person's corrupt. Yeah. But sometimes there are conflicts. So I want to explore the conflicts with Connie just to let this person know that we understand what's going on in your head right now. And I think we're going to try to, it's going to be a lot of different angles to cover here. So we'll see if we can keep the show short. But I do want to try my best to exhaust the angles that may come up during the dialogue. So we'll see what happens. And if I do see Connie blink longer than, like one blink lasting longer than a minute, because I can see it on my end. You guys can't, but I can. Then we're going to be probably down to the last hour of the show. Yeah, I'm keeping your ass up, Connie. Sorry, I'm keeping you up. You're staying up. Sorry. No, we'll probably come down to the, see, right now, Connie's my stopwatch. I'm going to be looking at the blinks if they get longer, because obviously your days are always busy. So first off, I don't know if the perspective is going to be different with custody and civilian. So I would like to start off with this. With a custody perspective, when they're in the academy, they're trained to kind of watch out for each other. It's a very immediate bond. And it's reinforced actually by the animosity of the trainers from day one, believe it or not. The animosity that we kind of hate the trainers kind of reinforce the bond with each other. We're kind of sharing in these moments that kind of bring us together. So a lot of people may not realize that, but that's why the academy instructors, sometimes they come off super harsh, because in the end, it's going to be an experience that we'll not forget, but also experience that will bring us together. That bond is very powerful. It's a bond that really symbolizes a family. And sometimes when that bond is that immediate and that close, when we have someone that kind of strays, we may actually feel guilty for being the ones that have to turn that person in. And it can make it even harder if you don't feel that you have the support of your peers in that process. So let's explore that from a custody perspective, Connie, just from what your mind said. So we're building this bond. By the way, this is a bond behind a wall where we need each other, guys. This ain't like another type of job. This is a job where we need each other. We rely on each other. So that actually adds to the immediate level of that bond, how close that bond is. But, again, now you have someone that may have strayed. What could be going on in my mind and by the way, this is not, and I know they've done something wrong. This is, I feel they are doing something wrong. That's a big difference. I know it can be proven, and if being tested, you can prove it. You can stand on your ground. It's when you feel it that's a little tougher, because you may not have nothing to lean on. And then obviously you can have some adverse reactions from your own peers who may believe that, what are you doing? This is our family. This is our blood. But let's discuss that a little bit. So do you think that bond that could be formed in the academy could affect a person's want to do the right thing?
So for sure, I feel like that bond in the academy is what brings you together. It's sort of like a sorority or a fraternity, right? You go through the motions from the beginning until you cross over, right? So it's like you go through this training and then you're in the facilities and you've grown to trust this person. You've grown to depend on this person. You've grown to just be bonded because you've kind of had to have each other's back. And I feel like once you get into the facility, it's the same expectation. So of course, I think it comes with its challenge when you have a feeling that something's going wrong. I think the challenge too is that we're taught to trust our gut, right? Like, don't ignore it when it's talking to you, right? Usually if something feels off, it's usually off. Usually something doesn't feel right, it's not right. But I think in this instance, the true challenge comes when this is someone that deep inside you want to trust, and you don't want to believe that that person is doing something that they probably shouldn't be doing.
Yeah, I like what you're saying too, because you also said at some level you have to convince yourself that the person's doing something wrong, because you're right. You may trust this person and may not be believing what it is that they're doing. So now you have to start to convince yourself, is what you're seeing, is it wrong? I actually like that, because that's true. I believe that 100%, especially if you have that high level of trust for that individual. One of the other things I also want to mention, especially when it comes to dealing with that bond, and we'll go back to custody real quick, but with the civilians, do they have that same bond?
I don't think we do. I think not initially. So I think when we first start out, we start to get to know each other's, our work ethic, our performance. We start to trust in each other. I mean, it's when we start to work on certain projects together that that bond is sort of formed, but we don't have it straight out the gate. It takes us a little time to form it. And then for those of us who stayed in the career for a long enough time, who may have also stayed in the same facility for the most of their career, like you find that you're really bonded with the people that you work with. But straight out the gate, like when you guys come out of the academy, we don't have that kind of bond.
Now, some people will say that, especially when it comes to code blue, which is officers, let's say code gray, whatever you want to do. The what is it called? The thin blue line of silence, whatever it is, the silence aspect. A lot of people think that the reason why corruption is not reported is because the officer is looking to protect the corrupt staff member. I've argued against that. I'm not saying it's 100, nothing's 100% in our dialogue, by the way. But I would like to say, for the most part, if that's the case, it's not so much they're looking to protect the corrupt act or the corrupt staff member. It may be that they don't want to be an outcast. And that's where we can counter that by showing support. When you step up and go to do the right thing, especially if the right thing is not, it's not solidified, it's not definitive, it's more of a feeling, like we mentioned. This is the key, guys. Remember, I'm mentioning when it's ambiguous. Like you feel it's the right thing, but again, you may not understand how to prove it. I just know something's wrong here. I feel it. It's the gut feeling, but to be able to put it down on paper, or to be able to have some proof that you can get the support you need, it just may not be evident. So having said that, I don't know if I report it, if I have enough to say, okay, well, if I report this, will others believe me? Because all I have is my feeling. So I think the one reason, I'll see what Connie's thoughts on this, is that I don't think it's always to protect a corrupt act. I would disagree with that. And I said not always. I mean, we do have, people that may go against the grain on that. But I think for the most part, I don't want to be an outcast. And if I don't get that proper support, or if I don't have something definitive that shows that this person is doing something wrong, then I'm going to be a little bit hesitant, because it's a chance that I'm going to be, pushed out. And if I'm pushed out in corrections, will they have my back? So do you agree with that at all, or?
So I don't know. I feel like, when those situations take place, the first thing I thought about was the stakes being high, right? So when the stakes are high, I think it makes you think about what are all the possible outcomes if you come forward and, put this person out on blast, right? Like, I mean, for lack of a better way of saying that, right? You come forward and say, this person, I believe, or I feel, or whatever it is about this person. And then you think about the impact, right? So you think about the investigations, you think about how uncomfortable everything is going to be in the facility. You think about, policies and procedures being changed because you came forward with this information. It's like, I think people do think about what are the possible outcomes of this situation, should it be true, right? Like, so right now, when we come into a facility, maybe everyone doesn't get pat down, right? Maybe it's wanded when they come in, whatever the security procedure is when you first come in. But then it turns out that someone gets found bringing something in. And so the whole procedure changes. And when you come in the morning, because you brought this thing forward, and people are like, damn, now I'm going to be late, or whatever that causes. And to know, like, you're owning that you are responsible for that. So I don't know necessarily that people just want to protect the person who could be doing the wrongdoings, but it's also thinking about what is the impact to everything else that's going to be in the facility that just may make life more difficult.
Right. And I think actually we're in agreement, because I think what I was trying to get is exactly what you're getting at. The end result is it's not just about protecting the corrupt act. There's other factors in play. And I actually like that. That's why it makes that decision, even for this person, so difficult. And I like what you just added, because I've had this discussion before and I never even had that perspective. So I agree with you 100%. There could be other things in play that could cause changes. And obviously, if that happens, everybody gets frustrated when it comes to change. One of the other things that we talked about when it comes to reporting. Now, again, going back with the civilian side of this, and this is going to be a tough question. Let me stay with custody for a second here, Connie, but I want to toss something your way. that we kind of had the discussion with. And all right, so can the right thing be subjective in the moment to the point where our integrity gets misplaced? So let me explain that, okay? Because I have something. I think you know where I'm going with this, maybe. Obviously, you picked up on what I just said. But let's just say, we know many different ways for corruption, right? We know that. Anytime an officer does what they shouldn't do, sometimes our emotions can corrupt us. You don't just need a inmate to give us a bribe, or sometimes we can get blinded in emotion, and sometimes our emotions can make us do foolish things, right? Which can make us not think like we should. So we can get caught up in the heat of a moment. Let's say me and an inmate wind up having a back and forth, and we get carried away, and all of a sudden, let's say, God forbid, but I start using excessive force. And let's say there's an officer that's right behind me that should be stopping me. But in context, maybe he sees that the inmate was an antagonist or whatever it is. Still doesn't justify the excessive use of force. Don't get me wrong, but just bear with me on this. But now what's right is subjective. Maybe it's not what's right with the agency, or what's right. It's the fact that, the inmate was the antagonist here. I'm sticking up for my boy, and the integrity now is not with, it's misplaced. Like the right thing to do is not by what the agency wants, but is by what this family has. So again, can what's right be subjective? Can, there be a loyalty to your family, but at the same time, a loyalty to the agency? So again, just to rephrase it with that context, do you think that the right thing can be subjective to the point where that we misplace our integrity?
I think it can. I mean, because even in thinking about that situation, right? You have the inmate who's the antagonist. You got the officer who's kind of, I guess, engaging back and forth. You've got the partner who's sitting kind of watching this all play out. And I mean, I think the reality, well, I could be wrong, but as I think about it, I'm like, so if this officer, I'm not saying the use of force, an excessive use of force would be warranted. What I'm saying is that if it did escalate to that point, I could see someone later saying, oh, but you could have stopped engaging with the inmate. But the other side of me says, well, if I did stop, like, what does that do as far as like my level of authority or control in that unit with the other inmates observing this exchange? And then he gets away with doing whatever it was that he was doing. So I think in the moment, I guess perhaps it could be subjective, because there's different ways that situation could have been handled. But I think that there really does come to a point of no return, right? Like, all right, we're already in this at this point. What does it look like if me as custody, I back down and the antagonist continues, right? And if there's no consequence to that antagonism, and I don't know, I'm not saying that the use of force would be the appropriate consequence. I know there are other things that we can do in order to curb certain behaviors, but I do see how, there could be some subjectivity in that.
Right now, mind you, we're not condoning it. It's just a dialogue. And again, all because we're saying the person is subjective and how they see the right thing doesn't mean it's right. We're not saying that. But you mentioned something that I don't want to overlook: consequences. Sometimes in these situations, if we don't have the backing by the lawmakers, we may take things into our own hands because we have to set a precedent. But again, doesn't mean it's the right thing either. I'm not saying that. Again, I gotta be very careful how we word things here. But we may feel we have to, because you said you're going back and forth. If I lose my level of authority, what's to say that, the next inmate's not going to challenge me at that point and challenge me. So there could be a way in which, okay, well, this officer should have reacted, unless they justified what happened in a manner that breaks away from what the agency would expect, like just how we could have justified it. So that's another thing. Not only am I interpreting it a certain way as being right, but that's based on how I've justified it. And you added that. You said it. I want, but we need that precedence. We need to set. So again, it doesn't mean it's right. It's just we're presenting why there be a conflict. So at that moment, it could be also how the officer or how that staff member justifies that excessive use of force. Now, again, if they get in trouble, they're still going to get in trouble. This is not to say that they're right because they were able to justify it. No, it's just that at this point here, this is what may stop that officer from jumping in, because at one point they see things in a manner that in their mind, it makes sense. Correct? So that justification is what leads to how they interpret what the staff members doing at that time, including with the excessive force. Correct, Connie? Is that what you were getting at?
So I mean, I think it's there's just a point where there's an engagement, and we get that, right? There's an interaction, it's going south. And I think that there just comes a point where you make a decision, right? I'm gonna go this way or that way. And who knows what's fueling that, right? So part of my thought process too is, when we think justification or we think perceived level of threat, for example, right? Like I feel like, so say this is an officer who's on his second double, right? We don't talk about the burnout and the fatigue and the frustration and all those other things, right? And I'm not making an excuse. I'm just kind of setting the backdrop for how the perception of this engagement being way more serious in that officer's thought process than it really is. I'm already stressed. It's been a rough couple of weeks for whatever reason. My work schedule's been crazy. All this stuff is happening. And now here's this engagement that, this inmate is just taking me there. And at the time, my mental capacity, where I am right now, may put me in a position where my perception of what this inmate is doing is calling for a certain response from me. And so I can get with an officer responding in a way that we may think is not appropriate, right? But we don't have the context of the officer that's making the decision to respond in the way that he or she is making it.
Yeah, and that's obviously, unfortunately, it's funny. Monday night quarterbackers, they never look for the context. I also want to add something else. And again, guys, this is just to kind of present a little insight. So if you're having any hesitation, take a listen to this dialogue and see maybe these are some of the concerns that are stopping you. So it's a wake-up thing, but we have to kind of walk in your shoes to understand that's what we're doing. And again, never justifying the excessive use of force. I'm just going to keep on reiterating that. But sometimes you got to have dialogue that touches onto that. It just is what it is. Also, we got to talk about normalized behavior. Let's not go over that. Let's not forget to go over that, because especially when you're new and you're entering this profession, you're going to walk into stuff that's new to you, but it's new to you, but it looks like it's already been happening at this facility. So the sad thing is if you're new and you're trying to understand how this facility works, and this seems to be the norm, sad to say, but it could be. The problem is that you may not see anything wrong with it because it's been normalized, especially by people that could be training you, people that you have trust. So if the people that are put in a higher position to kind of train you, kind of get you, introduced to this profession, that's the key, mind you, introduced to this profession. And more importantly, they're people that you trust and have respect for, you may have a little bit of trouble pulling yourself away from, the idea that, okay, well, maybe they aren't doing something, you may be thinking that they are, because again, you trust them. You're new to the profession and it's normalized, it's normalized. So now if you decide, because maybe, you decide maybe I will step up, you'll be quickly to second guess yourself. Because again, the people that you trust could easily, convince you, hey, it's just what happens all the time. So what do you think about that when you have normalized behavior? And again, you're new to the profession, hear me out. The behavior is just something that's already ongoing, so you're walking in on it. And the people that are doing it are people that are in the position to train you. But I want to add on top of that, people that you also have learned to trust and respect.
So, I mean, those are those instances where, so past practice is just that. It's past practice and it's habitual. Like, people are routinely doing things, whether it's right or wrong, because this is how we've always done it. I think certainly as a new person coming into the facility, it is very difficult to really understand what's a past practice versus what's the current policy or procedure. And so, this is one of those instances where, although you do have respect for the person that's training you, like, you will be held responsible for knowing what the current practices and what are appropriate practices, what are the real ways to interpret the policies, the procedures, the directives, the post orders, whatever those things are that you need to refer to in order to get direction. I think this is one of those times that, although you may have respect, like, you need to ask some questions, because you don't want to end up getting jammed up because you did this because someone told you to, but it's not what you should be doing. And not to say that there is no culpability of the person who is training you, but if the person is already gone, they've now retired, that's just how you were trained. At some point, like, you've got to take ownership for, sort of what you should know in order to, because you're going to be held accountable anyway, right? And that's really just it.
Yeah, I want to add something to that, because you're touching on something that so guys, when is this happening and you're new? Because I stressed on new, it's going to be ambiguous, and you're going to get those feelings until the people you trust can learn how to get you to believe in what they're doing is right. Again, to get you to internalize their justification. So now when it's no longer ambiguous because you have internalized their justification, now you're not going to act on that feeling. So, because you're not going to have it. So Connie's right. At the very beginning, most of what you see may not be based on what the professionals teach you, but based on what you yourself are bringing in. Like, does this look right? Does it feel right? Because most likely, if you feel that something's wrong, then most likely it could be. So you have to be very careful as to how you allow people in to justify that conflict. Because if they start to justify that conflict, eventually the ambiguity gets removed and you start believing in that justification. So right at the bat, if you're new and if you feel something isn't right, like Connie said, ask the questions then immediately, because the feelings of conflict still exist. And believe it or not, guys, it's those feelings of conflict that, through your own curiousness, especially if you're not feeling their justification at that point, that's what's going to help you actually decide to start doing the right thing, because now you're not giving them a chance to have that behavior justified. But ultimately, what I'm talking about is to break away from what really shouldn't be normalized. Now, before we go into, because there's another avenue of corruption I want to touch on that could also make it a little bit tougher. It's more of the feeling versus the know. I do want to cross into that. And we'll move away from excessive force. Maybe we'll cover it where, maybe getting too close to an inmate. But again, not 100%, but more of a feeling over a no. But I want to ask you a question. Anything that we just discussed right now with the normalizing the behavior, the ambiguity, being new, stuff like that could affect the civilian staff the same way?
So for sure, something simple like having a cell phone in your pocket, right? Like, you think, like, we know that the rules are that you shouldn't have your cell phone in your pocket. But, I've had the experience of folks who'd been there a long time. Oh, the cell phone's in my lab coat. I didn't realize it was there, but they don't go back out to take it out. And so you've got new people who come in and they kind of follow suit, like, oh, it was in my purse, no big deal. No, it's a big deal. You need to take it back out. It's like, I think these little things that seem to be not matter until they become big things that do matter. And I feel like with the civilians, we're not as versed with, like, the policies and procedures as it relates to safety and security. We're not as versed as with a lot of here are other ways that everyday things can become dangerous in this environment. So it's particularly being a new civilian coming into the role, the ambiguity and, like, the newness of it all, I think really could make for a very unsafe situation. And so in the event that, a civilian can get connected, because many places we try to do some sort of mentorship or, like, not mentorship, or maybe like a shadowing to kind of learn. So here are some things you need to learn up front. And that means that that's not partnering people with someone who's been there a really long time, who's got some bad habits, right? Because those bad habits kind of get passed on, even though we don't want them to. So I don't know. I think there's a little bit with civilians where we come in a little naive to begin with. And then I think if we could have some good mentorship or partnership or something with people who've had some longevity in the career, I think it would help us to be a lot more, I don't know, aware as we start going through the facility and doing whatever we need to be doing.
You know what's great about the show, before we cross into something, the next part of this topic, is that, again, I talked about the beginning, but we construct the dialogue as it goes. We don't prep. We just, hey, this is the top, let's see where it goes. And yourself, Russ, Greg, I mean, we have such amazing people that are able to just keep it going, just feeding off each other and keep it going. Just as we're having this dialogue right now, outside the other amazing guests, obviously Russ and all them, just between us, two people right now that literally have these forward-thinking minds, very unique, that are able to really put ourselves in these people's shoes and try to think of every angle. It's mentally exhausting. It is, because we're thinking as we go. But in my mind, it's unique and it's rare. So it's just a compliment to each other. I just think you have just you have a beautiful mind. And I'm not talking about the Russell Crowe movie. I'm just talking about, I'm talking about the fact that we're able to have this dialogue and not really know where we're going. And then you can even step into areas that you're not too familiar with, but you create familiarity as you're talking through it, which I just find to be talk all day, and that's why I enjoy it, and people will get, people listen to the dialogue, they get the information that they need, but they get it beyond what you can. I mean, some people, we can just spit out facts and here, take those facts with you. But if you really want to stay with you, you got to understand why those facts exist. And we give not just the facts, but we're willing to cross into the controversial, with the why. I just think it's great dialogue. Now, with that said, moving over, the feeling versus the know. Sometimes you talked about this at the beginning about trusting your gut. And it is. It's sometimes you feel it, but you can't prove it. And I think the problem here, and this comes with being the social outcast part, is if I can't prove it, then I become hesitant in approaching it, because I don't know how that's going to be interpreted, even if it's a good faith effort. Like, okay, maybe you're a little too close to that inmate, but at the end of the day, it's not like you're doing anything wrong at this point. Maybe something's developing. And this is where the process becomes an issue too, guys, because manipulation is a process. We can't wait for the end result. So you have to catch it when that person goes from the front of the podium to the corner of the podium. I mean, little subtle things, or all of a sudden work dialogue becomes talking about the football game that happened yesterday, but not everybody's going to see that as, they're going to see it as superficial, but now we're coming in because we're forward thinkers and we're thinking like, well, a couple of months down the line, this could develop into how many kids you have, and then months later, oh my God, you're already caught up in the closet with the inmate, or you're bringing in stuff for the inmate. Wow, how did it start? Well, it started a year ago when, you allowed this inmate to get too close based on what you thought was superficial. Now, when you see these type of actions, I will give people credit that it takes a lot of courage to address it at any level. Whether you're going to go to the person on the side and say, hey, listen, when you work my unit, these are things I appreciate that you don't do, if you don't mind. Or these are things I want you to do, as opposed to what you're doing. Or if you have to go to a supervisor or your fellow peers for support, whatever it is, it takes a lot of courage, only because I want people to know that I would like to think that, it's easy to do that, but not when you feel it as opposed to know it. It's a different ball game. It really is, because there's a chance that in the process of you trying on a feeling to address the issue, it could cause such a divide between you and that person you're trying to help. Because technically I would like to look at it as help, because the person hasn't crossed down the path, or it could have at that point, who knows? But the point is, I'm trying to help. Or even with my peers, don't you understand, if this person gets corrupted, they're a threat to all of us. you know? So at the end of the day, it takes a lot of courage for that one person to step up and do the right thing. But let's talk about conformity now. If you're the only person stepping up and the peers come out and they somehow just don't give you the support that you need, only very few people will be consistent with the path that needs to be taken at that point. Only very few, because of the concern of being an outcast and not being accepted. By the way, bravo if you're one of the few, like the person that messaged me, bravo if you're one of the few, even if you're not getting the support. But that feeling is just so strong, you can't deny it. And you're like, you know what, you take it up another notch. Bravo for you, because it takes a lot of courage. I don't think people realize that, but it does. But again, the support would really motivate the behavior to do the right thing. But what's your thoughts on that? So like, you know, I see someone that I feel is doing something wrong. I try to make the approach. I'm not getting the support. Do you think that could prevent me from continuing that pursuit? Or do you think that could motivate me to say, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and bring it up a notch?
So I think honestly, it depends on the individual, right? Because as human beings, we want to belong. And particularly in a place, it's like, it's natural, right? We want to belong. We want to feel like we are a part of something. You know, it's like being a part of the family, being a part of the team. So we don't want to do things that are going to make us the social outcast, right? We don't want to do things like that. It's an uncomfortable space to be in, you know? So I think that there are cases, or there are times where, you know, someone may say, you know what, social outcasts are not, the way this person is compromising everyone. You know, I can't stand by and not say something. But you do have those people who, you know, can't handle the peer pressure, right? Who cannot handle the glances, the stares, the whispers, everything that comes along with you coming forward and, you know, kind of putting one of our family members out there. You know, you're throwing them under the bus. And I think the moment that you can make the mindset shift that that person threw themselves under the bus, it gives you the ability to go forward and stand your ground and, you know, kind of charge forward in the way that you were, as opposed to that wavering feeling that you're going to get, because it does feel uncomfortable, because people who used to talk to you don't talk to you anymore. Because now when you respond to a code, you hope that, you know, everyone still has your back. Like I think there are other things that come into play when you think about being the person that might be breaking that family bond to an extent.
Right. I think I agree. That's the one. That's, again, on the custody level, it get reinforced in the academy. So it makes it the motivation. You know, it goes both ways too, because I actually could see something too. But then you have to see that person as, like you said, they're breaking the family bond, not you. So if you're doing something wrong, I'm not the one that broke the family bond. Actually, I'm the one that's trying to reinforce it. You're no longer family. So having said that, I need to tell my family that, you know, you're out. But unfortunately, some people won't perceive it that way, you know, and that, okay, now I will tell you one thing. That to me is when the effort is to protect corruption. I'll give it at that. Now that I'm having that thought, that to me is, if I'm trying to do the right thing and I'm not being supported, then yes, me trying to do the right thing is, you know, the right thing. And if I don't do it, it's because I don't want to be the outcast. But the people that aren't supporting me, knowing that I can kind of relate to what this person is trying to do, then yes, I'll agree with that. As long as they themselves are kind of in the know. This is not a feeling anymore. This is, I know it. So if I'm an officer and I know it's happening and I go to do something right and then you stop me, if I'm stopped and I fall for it again, it's probably because I don't want to be an outcast. But if they're not doing it, it's because, guess what? By the way, they know it is because they're protecting the corrupt act and they're protecting someone that they believe is still family, when, guys, they're not family anymore, guys. You got to realize something. They went over to the dark side. And before we come to a close, because as I mentioned, Connie's winks are getting a little bit longer. Connie, I want people to know something real quick. I don't know if you guys know this, but believe it or not, I used to teach identifying deceptive behavior. And right now you're lying to me like you're awake. And I could easily see that. But I want. Hey guys, I know you can't see what I see, but she has heart. She does. There's such a dedication in her to finish this episode, and I'm the asshole because I'm keeping it on. I'm doing that on purpose. I'm making up things to talk about because I know you're tired. I don't have nowhere else to go with this dialogue, but I will do whatever I can to make up something just to keep you awake. But actually, I do have one more thought, if I may. The risk. All right, so wait, yeah, I'll let you. I'm only messing with you. The risk. One last thing, and then maybe we could explore it again with Russ. If I feel the risk is that great, and I know the risk is that great, that should be enough of a motivator to me to protect my family and just go ahead and jump on it. And I think it would take a lot of convincing for me not to do that. Like I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do the right thing. For those that can easily get swayed, even though you know the risk is great, I got a problem with that because I remember I was on CNN a while back, and one of the things we discussed was that sometimes when an officer gets taken out, a lot of us are not shocked by it. That always bothered me. I'm guilty of that too. A lot of that bothered me because it's like somewhere along the line we've noticed something for us not to be shocked by it. I mean, there's only been a few officers that I've seen that have gotten caught up that have really blew my mind. I can't believe. But for most part, go either way. So that makes me want to go back home and kind of rethink in my head. Like, why does it not bother me? Why am I not? Because I should be shocked by it. This is my brother that just got arrested. You know, why am I not shocked by that? That means there are certain things that I saw that I failed to listen to myself on. You know, I just, insight. And the problem is that if matters were worse, let's say this wasn't, a non-dual relationship, but rather a weapon that led into the back of one of your officers or one of your brothers, how could you live with yourself? So if I knew that right now, and I would like to think this is the case, that there's a relationship developing here between this inmate and an officer that could lead to this inmate manipulating this officer to bring in a weapon to stab my brother, the risk for me right now to not report that, because there's a potential there, is so great that I may be willing to burn whatever I got to burn to make sure I can do what I got to do to make sure that this relationship, even if it is me going up there and say, listen, you guys are a little too close. And if I still see that relationship too close, I'm going to my supervisor. I don't care if I'm hated. I don't care whatever it is, because at the end of the day, I have to live with knowing the fact that I could have done something. And that moral, that aspect of that should motivate me past. But if it doesn't, I'll get Connie.
I was just going to say, it might be easier for you to do that when you've had some time on the job, right? But when you're a newer employee, I feel like it's much harder for you to make that decision and feel confident in that decision because you haven't established, I think, enough relationships very early on to just know that people are going to be supportive of you. So it might be harder. I don't know that the person is not thinking about the risks. I just think they may be thinking about the risk to them, right? Like, am I able to look at the broader picture? Do I really understand the broader implications? Or am I immediately looking at the risk to me being a newer staff person and what that means if I come forward?
Yeah, you know what's funny? When we talk about corrupt staff and we talk about, what the outcome could be, I don't know if a lot of us actually think of a weapon right away. I think some of us will think about sex between an inmate and officer or an inmate staff member, maybe drugs.
Yeah.
But I think it's a very extreme thought, but still highly possible. Don't get me wrong, where someone's thinking, well, this relationship's going to turn into a knife that's going to be brought in, that's going to go into, or a gun or weapon. But we have to think at that extreme. But you're right. For a rookie, they're still establishing that level of trust among staff, and it's going to be very hard for them. So I can understand where you're coming from. But having said that, that's why we have this show. I'm sorry. You're right. You're 100%. That's why we have this show. So if you're new and you're watching this, listen to what we just said. It is going to be hard, but don't let that stop you from doing what needs to be done. Because it could also be hard for people that have that developed relationship too. So if we look at it not from the middle, but from the extremes, the people who don't or the people that do. But think about the perspective here. One is to gain, one's to lose. You know what I mean? So if I'm the rookie, my motivation is to gain the trust. This can counter that. If I'm a senior, I already have the trust. I don't want to lose it. So again, just from the perspective, you're a senior officer, right? You don't want to lose the trust, but guys, still do the right thing. And if you're new, you're looking to gain trust, but guys, do the right thing. Again, so that was well said, Connie, because it is two extremes, but the end result's still the same. You know, it's still the same. You got to still step up, and especially, and I like to think, guys, the risk could be great. You know, the risk could be great, and it's more about just the potential for drugs or sex, the potential for a weapon to come in. I mean, there have been guns smuggled into facilities, guys. We all know that to be true. Hey, Connie, you have any closing thoughts?
Closing thoughts. I just want to say, you know what, this is a very tough situation. You know, when you think about whether you're new or whether you've been there for a long time and you've built the trust, you know, it's very hard to accept that a family member has done something to betray us. And we are going to deal as human beings with our own emotions about that betrayal. And when one of our, you know, our fellow officers or fellow civilians does something that puts all of us in jeopardy or puts our facilities in jeopardy, we do feel that betrayal. And, you know, it may motivate or de-incentivize someone from doing the right thing. And I just feel like when you think more broadly, because, you know, when Anthony first said the knife, like, I was like, somebody's gonna bring a weapon in, you know, like, but the extreme thought of that made the decision for me. Like, there is no should I or shouldn't I come forward. When you think of the extreme of where one of these situations can go, there really is no debate. And so I would just say, as much as the betrayal and the feelings of trust and all the belonging that we want to have as we're working behind the wall, the reality is that when someone does something that puts our family in jeopardy, we have to do our best to be proactive or preemptively address those issues.
Well, real quick, I just want to revisit something. So you didn't think weapon, right?
I didn't think weapon. I did think drugs. That was the first thing I thought. I mean, and I hate that even in my mind that I minimized sex. I was like, all right, well, you know, those things happen. Not to say it's okay either way, but that it does put us at risk. But, you know, it wasn't as extreme in my mind as a weapon. You know, I was like, well, they bring in drugs and we know what that creates on the back end, the black market of drugs and all of that. But then when you said knife, I was like, whoa, who's doing that? You know, because that weapon could injure you as well, the person who's bringing it in. So it was just an extreme that actually made me automatically stop thinking about it was no longer a question in my mind anymore of what you should do.
Let me add some more extremes and tell me if you think they're probable. I have two more, I could add all day, but let me add you two more and tell me if you think they're probable. So do you think the weapon's probable?
The weapon is probable.
What about escape tools?
Yes, that's probable. I mean, isn't that what happened?
It happened. What about personal information on a peer? Oh
my God, yes.
I can go all day, Connie.
Yeah, I mean, I've experienced the personal information on a peer. I mean, it wasn't me, but that's definitely a really, you know.
And let me ask you a question. How easy is it for me as a corrupt officer to smuggle in personal information on a peer?
Very.
It's all here.
Very.
You corrupt me, you know, so having said that, you know, think about this, guys, right now. Just that little dialogue. And again, it's real easy to smuggle in because that's dangerous too. You know, that's extreme and people don't realize that.
Yeah, something as simple as every Tuesday night she's at the bar.
Why not?
You know, like, I'm like, wow, that's so bad, but yeah, I get it.
Why not? And then again, so it's a lot more than just a physical contraband. You know what I mean? Yeah, we could test people all day for whatever it is, but at the end of the day, there's information that doesn't have to be shared. You know, even just operations, you know, facility operations, or maybe letting people know letting inmates know when we're understaffed in certain areas. Happens. But again, we can go all day on that. But guys, I thought this was a great dialogue. It was a request that was tossed our way, and I just wanted to have the dialogue to say it's not always as easy as we may think. And I think even if you may feel that it is, at least when you watch, just be objective and tell me, do these thoughts make sense to you? You know, I mean, could this be possible? And that's the key. So hopefully when someone's watching the dialogue, we've given you a couple of thoughts to have insight on. So if you feel hesitant at any moment, maybe you can reflect back on that video, understand why, and then once you understand the why, motivate yourself to move forward. As always, guys, the show is Tier Talk. If you haven't, please subscribe, interact, engage, comment, hit that bell. The bell's going to notify you every time I post up a video. Don't forget, Connie's book's out there. Cage Was Her Cocoon will be out October 30th. As always, guys, stay safe.